know who's going to read what you write 10 years from now. So anyway, we had this second reconstruction. Think about what came to second reconstruction. Integration of desegregation, not integration, of public school, Medicaid, Medicare, expanding Social Security, economic opportunity, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, minimum wage, the war on poverty. Fusion happened, fusion. And then again, the Dixiecrats, the extremists, conservative revolted. They couldn't stand it. They turned to violence and terror. And then they decided to launch what? The Southern Strategy. And they used the Southern, and guess what their mantra was? We must redeem America. We must take the country back. But I believe therein lies a roadmap for us today. We must begin to think in terms of building, let me rephrase it, of birthing a third reconstruction. And I believe that all of this movement and all of this struggle is nothing but the birthplace of a third reconstruction being born right in our midst. And I want to suggest 14 steps, 14 things that we believe are critical to the building of this third reconstruction that we're testing in the moral movement, that we're learning to have some success. Because America's third reconstruction depends on a moral movement, a matter of the heart, not just politics. That it is something for which I must give my life to. It is a struggle for which, if I get up in the morning and I'm not engaged in it, I'm not even really living. It's something with a deep call. And I believe it has to be deeply rooted in the South. And it has to emerge state by state. And I believe no single leader or organization can orchestrate it. It never has. And here are the 14 steps. Number one, we must engage in indigenously led grassroots organizing across states. There's no shortcut around it. Must build relationships at the state level. Helicopter leadership by so-called national leaders will not sustain a moral movement. What you need is to make local movements national. The nation didn't change from D.C. down, it changed from Selma and Birmingham and Greensboro up. People come to me sometimes and they say, Rev Barber, we like the work you're doing in North Carolina, but it's not national. I said, by who's standing? You don't have to have an address in D.C. to be national. All you got to do is have a movement that begins to touch the heart and the mind and the imagination of people across the nation. You don't have to try to be everywhere. When people say, Rev Barber, come here and lead our movement. I said, no, but I will slip in and teach you what we've learned so you can lead it yourself. Indigenous, by the way, prophets in the Bible are regional. That's why you had more than one. You got Amos, Micah. They also are time position. Amos, Micah, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Hosea, Habakkuk. They all were positioned for a particular area. And normally it wasn't a big area. But the work they did in that area had impact across. So what we need are an indigenously led, state-based, state government focus. Because most of the worst stuff happening to us is the place we have the least amount of attention. And that's in these state capitals. We got to figure out a way to get C-SPAN and blog inside of these state capitals, listening to the debates on the floor of these state capitals so that people can hear exactly what's being said and done. State-based state government focus, deeply moral, deeply constitutional, anti-racist, anti-poverty, pro-justice, pro-labor, transformative fusion movement. Yeah. Number two, we need to use moral language to frame and critique public policy regardless of who's in power. A moral movement claims higher ground than a mere partisan debate by returning the public discourse to our deepest moral and constitutional values. In other words, somebody must stand up and say, it doesn't matter what party is in power. or who has a political supermajority. There are some things that transcend political majority, partisan politics. There are some things that are just right, and there are some things that are just wrong. There are some things that are just extreme and immoral. Watch what I mean by that. For instance, we can't let, when these extremists say, we want to read the Constitution, we ought to be the first one to say, let's read it. Let's read it. That's exactly what I want you to do. Let's read it. And let's start with this, that freedom isn't even the first consideration of our Constitution. Because there is no concept of a freedom in the American Constitution without first the establishment of justice, the providing for the common defense, the promoting of the general welfare, and the insurance of domestic tranquility. You want to read the Constitution? Okay, let's read it. If you'll stop saying welfare is a bad word since it's found in the Constitution. But let's talk about capitalism that must establish justice, because that's the only capitalism that's legalized in this country, and anything else is constitutionally inconsistent. Let's read it. And then, and also a moral argument frees us to touch on that. So I didn't know I was a slave. Go ahead, it's all right, white people. Tell me, I didn't know. Tell your neighbors that they but I'm going to prove to y'all we all are slaves, but we're going to be free today. Say, I didn't know I was a slave. Now let me tell you why I know we're slaves. Because how many of us, when we talk, we still use that language, right and left? Why? Why are you using language from the 17th century? That's where it came from in the French Revolution. When the right wanted the monarchy and the left, why? Why do you put people in boxes like that? Why do you use the language conservative versus liberal? I'm both. Ketchup, I'm liberal. Hot sauce, I'm conservative. How do you allow people to call themselves right that are so wrong? Why do you put yourself in a linguistic box when you debate them? Why do you give away 50% of your argument? Why do you call somebody right if you won't tell around tell people they're wrong? I told you. Why do you say conservative when if justice and promoting the general welfare and the common good is the essence of our Constitution? And conserve means to hold on to the essence of, and if everything they do undermines justice, then how do you allow them to get away with calling themselves conservative? You see what I'm saying? I know it makes your head hurt, but somebody has to begin to change the language, because language is either a tool of liberation or it's a tool of domination. And when you're fighting an adversary, you don't let them tell their story, nor do you use their language. That's why you only call people Republican. How do you call somebody Republican and claim they're kin to Abraham Lincoln and they're fighting for voter suppression? So what do we call it? Extremists. Moral language gives you new metaphors, new ability. And you can say, the reason I'm against this policy is not because it's left or right or conservative. I'm against it because it's constitutionally inconsistent, it's morally indefensible, and it's economically insane. And we certainly have to challenge the hypocrisy of the so-called, religious right, especially when they're so wrong. The fact of the matter is, I'm a theological biblicist. So let me let you all know, and we got to get some logs out on this. The greatest sin in the Bible is the sin of idolatry. Second, self-worship. The second greatest sin that has always existed wherever people worship themselves is injustice. And there's more than 2,000 scriptures in the Bible that deal with the issue of injustice toward women, the stranger, the poor, the sick, the hurting, the unaccepted. If I had time, I'd go through them. I'm not going to go through them. But my point is, how does somebody get to call themselves a conservative when they liberally leave out so much of what God is really concerned about? No, but how do you claim, if you just take from, how do you claim to be conservative when you talk more about what God talks the least about, and the least about what God, you talk the least about what God talks the most about, and the most about what God, you got 2,000 scriptures that talk about justice and how you treat the vulnerable and those around, and not one on prayer in the school. You got 2,000 scriptures. You might have 3 that talk about homosexuality, and not one of those trumps this scripture. You still must love your neighbor as yourself. So we can't succumb to those who bought Christianity in the pulpit and turned it into Americanity and put preachers to be their front people. Nor can we throw away, because we're angry with them, the deep religious and moral values that have been at the backbone of every progressive movement. There would have been no labor movement if it wasn't for the social gospel. Not I mean totally, but it was part of it. There would have been no abolition movement without William Lloyd Garrison when he got arrested in Boston, writing on his cell, I, William Lloyd Garrison, was arrested this day for preaching the damnable gospel that all men are created equal. There would have been no movement without the civil rights, without the theological framework and moral framework underneath the civil rights movement. So we are in a serious moral crisis when politicians welcome clergy. Some of them, when they talk about abortion, prayer in the school, homosexuality, or when they speak out on poverty, unchecked capitalism, labor rights, healthcare, criminal justice reform, climate control, and raising the living wage, they say, oh, you gotta be quiet now because you're talking politics. Yeah. We need a lot of blogs saying we are talking politics, but it's the politics of Jesus, it's the politics of Isaiah, it's the politics of prophetic social consciousness, and moral framing allows us to change the language. And we cannot allow so-called conservatives who are really extremists to engage in moral theological hypocrisy and hijack the powerful language of faith. And we have to do something that the Pope has done and that Moral Monday is showing to do. We've got to get the message out of the containments of the sanctuary into the streets where the prophets and Jesus live. Then if we do this moral framework, we can unite around a moral agenda. I don't go to a lot of meetings now that want to sit down and wait 3 days to figure out what the agenda is. You know, right now we ought to be clear on at least some basics. Let's see if we agree. I believe a moral agenda should be number one, that we're going to secure pro-labor, anti-poverty policy that ensure economic sustainability by fighting for full employment, living wages, the alleviation of disparate unemployment, a green economy, labor rights, affordable housing, targeted empowerment zone, strong safety nets for the poor, fair policies for immigrants, infrastructure development, and ceasing war baiting and extreme militarism, and a fair tax reform. I think we ought to be agree on that. Number two, within the moral framework, whether it's a constitutional moral framework or a religious framework, we ought to be able to agree on education equality by ensuring that every child receives a high-quality, well-funded, constitutional, diverse public education, as well as access to community colleges and universities by securing equitable funding for minority colleges and universities. Number two, we ought to at least agree on health care for all. And we're going to begin by ensuring access to the Affordable Care Act, but we're not going to stop there. We're not going to stop there. We ought to be serious about guaranteeing Social Security, and especially black folks, since most of us and women didn't even get it till 1954. That's a sermon for another day. And we ought to be deeply committed to women's health and environmental protection. Number three. Four. I think we ought to be able to agree morally on fairness in the criminal justice system by addressing the continuing inequalities in the system and providing equal protection under the law for black, brown, and poor white people. And then I think we ought to agree morally that we're going to protect and expand voting rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, immigrant rights, and the fundamental principle of equal protection under the law. And we understand that not as separate agendas, but intersection. that there's a moral glue that intersects all of those. That all of the people fighting each of these issues is fighting all of those issues. Yes. When you check their voting record, the same people fighting environmental justice are fighting public education. The same people fighting public education are fighting Medicaid expansion. The same people fighting Medicaid expansion are fighting women's health. The same people fighting women's health are fighting against the LGBT community. The same people fighting the LGBT community are fighting the labor rights community. So if they are cynical enough to be together, we ought to be courageous and smart enough to come together. That right intersectional. Let me show you what I mean. Here we are 50 years after voting rights come today, and we have less voting rights than we had in 1965. That should not be just a concern for the NAACP. You have to understand the attacks on black and brown voting power. 33 states have 133 proposals still being pushed. We've had a 2-year filibuster. 2 years, Storm 30 didn't do for 24 hours and 30 minutes. We had a 2-year filibuster since June 25, 2013 of the Congress failing to do what the 15th Amendment says it has to do, and that is enforce voting rights. So for 2 years, they have not fixed Section 4 as was dictated to them by the Supreme Court, and thereby they have allowed an open season on voting rights that has unleashed voter suppression and apartheid redistricting all over the South and other places of the country, which then allows the extremists to hold Congress and state houses hostage. But here's what we got to make sure people are clear. The attack on voting rights is an attack on labor. It's an attack on women. It's an attack on public education. Remember the model, if you lock up the South, then you lock up progressive politics, which is why everybody, black, white, every organization that believes in progress should be unified in demanding that the Voting Rights Amendment Act that restores Section 4 be passed this year, and we ought to be making sure that not one presidential debate is held without them having to answer the question, where are you on voting rights 50 years after selling? And not allowing them to make it just a black issue. It is about black and brown people, but it's also about this power of fusion politics and hindering the ability of black and white and brown people and others to be a fusion politics that can transform and fundamentally change this nation and birth this third Reconstruction. And North Carolina is today's cell. Because the case in North Carolina is the test case. Because if they were to get away with this case in North Carolina and basically argue that a state can change its laws any way it desires, particularly when you don't have Section 5, but more importantly, the argument they're putting forth is that as long as it's state policy, they can retrogress. When they see a policy that's actually benefiting black and brown and white people coming together, they can use race as a pretense to retrogress, and there's nothing the courts can say about it. If we get, that becomes the standard. And then we're to win. Then that means it's unleashed all over the country. The second example of why we got to understand the intersectionality of this issue is what just happened in Charleston. When the governor stands up and says because 9 people died, they're going to now bring the flag down. And some people had the nerve to applaud that. First of all, the flag shouldn't have been up. It was taken down at the end of the Civil War. It shouldn't have been up. It's a lost cause. But more importantly, listen to the narrative. What she suggested was only black death matters. We got challenged that. White and black, we got challenged. See, you know, he had boycotted for 15 years, but 15 years of living people didn't get the flag down. Only when 9 people died, that's going to mess up your summer economy. No, and they can't just die now. They can't just die. They have to die brutally, and then the people have to respond to that death right. You can't be in the street. You can't demand other things happen like Medicaid expansion, living wages. You can only talk about the flag coming down, and then you have to be settled for that flag coming down. Then you have to watch us do all of the formal pomp and circumstance when it comes down. And you have to keep quiet. And even when you have the funeral, you can't have a funeral like Dr. King had when those 4 girls were blown up in the Birmingham church, where he stood up there and said, you don't know who killed these girls? Every politician that has fed their constituents the stale bread of hatred and spoiled of racism. Yes. Wow. Every preacher that has stayed behind their stained glass windows and not even gotten in the college, you can't have nobody say that from the pulpit. You basically have to act like Reverend Pickney died naturally. And you don't want mourning. You don't want a lot of mourning. Because if folk get to start the mourning, then the mourning serves as a will cut through the distortions. And if they mourn about those 9 people dying, I mean really mourn. And if the nation mourns, and if somebody gets up and says, you know, Reverend Pickney, the night we read why he was late, because he was fighting for more money for the corridor of shame in public education. He believed in Medicaid expansion. His members believed in a living wage. So if we really want to honor Reverend Pickney, let's bring the flag down. But with the same pen that you bring the flag down, let's sign Medicaid expansion into law. Let's sign DailyKos Connects. No. Here it comes in. Shh. Well, a moral argument says you gotta have that conversation. And anything less is immoral. Anything less cheapens the lives. Anything less allows the narrative to say only black death matters. Anything less actually says, I'm going to misinterpret the forgiveness of the people. Those people forgave Dalen Roof because they recognized Dalen Roof was a symptom of a greater problem. Yes, it's called prophetic forgiveness. It's the same forgiveness as in the nonviolent community, where you forgive the individual while you still hold accountable the system. I was just there with the family on the day of grace when now they're fighting for the continuation of the things that family members stood for. And they're very clear that people ought not be misinterpreting their forgiveness. And a moral critique, not a Democrat or Republican critique, can unpack that. So in reality, what took place and the way the governor and others in South Carolina are attempting to use the flag coming down as a cover-up of the injustices that are still up is not just a black issue, it's intersectional. It's connected to labor, to LGBT rights, to voting rights, to women's rights. All of them is connected. Well, the other things that we say we've got to have, and I'll go through these quickly, is first of all, we've got to demonstrate a commitment to civil disobedience. Smart civil disobedience must be a part of bringing this third Reconstruction, and it needs to happen in the United States. Number 4, we got to build a stage from which to lift the voices of everyday people impacted by immoral policies. A moral movement must put a face on the injustices. And that's where bloggers, we need your help. We got to have some blogs that show the face of the people that have been denied Medicaid, so that the people that racialize entitlements can't get away with that. The face of the people that are being denied living wages. In fact, we need some good investigative bloggers that will find some people who died because of the lack of Medicaid, because these southern governors are allowing 8 million people to go without Medicaid expansion, and then ask the family to allow you to do what Mamie Till did when her son was killed. She invited Ebony magazine in and kept the casket open. You need to help us find some preachers that'll say, or some imams, or some rabbis, that if somebody dies in your congregation and they couldn't live if they had Medicaid expansion, invite us at the end and let's have an open casket funeral. Let's invite the public in and say, this is not God calling somebody. You refuse to have any more cute funeral. This is the result of bad public policy by legislators and governors, and it does not have to be this way. We got to put a face on these 14 million poor children that exist in the richest nation in the world. We got to put a face on our immigrant brothers and sisters. We got to put a face on those who need liberty. We got to put a face on those being hurt by environmental injustices. We got to blog, we got to write about it, we got to find the people who are having the health problems and the limbs that won't work. And then number 5, we got to recognize the centrality of race. Somebody asked you today, is it class or race? We need some bloggers to say it is. That's all I need you to say. Don't waste a lot of time trying to separate race and class. It is. That race and race-based slavery and white supremacy is America's original sin. And we need some folk that say it that don't necessarily have ebony hue.
Thank you.
You can always, again, in the moral movement, this is how we do it in the moral movement. Some days, you know Tanya Rawls? Bishop Tanya Rawls? Some days Tanya Rawls and I get on the stand, and Tanya Rawls will stand up there and she'll say, I'm an LGBT woman, but I want to talk today about racism. And I'll get on the stand and say, I'm a straight man, but I want to talk about the LGBT issues. And for what? That's the point. Or sometimes I get up with some of the women with Planned Parenthood and others, and they'll come on the forum. We'll do a radio show, and they'll say, why are you here to talk about women's rights? I said, no, I'm here to talk about what's happening to black people. And I said, well, I'm a black man, but I'm here to talk about what's happening to women. In other words, we have to understand and let our adversaries know, this time you will never, ever separate us again, because we understand what's happening. We have people on God, and we know the game that's being played on the American psyche. We must build a broad, diverse coalition of moral and religious leaders of all faith. All faith traditions are not the same, but if you check them all, justice and love are at the center of them. And we have to, in particularly, hook them together, whether they be Christian, Muslim, Hindu, or otherwise, and it's possible. And DailyKos, we need folk to help us lift these voices. The Pope is not the only one saying it. There are a lot of prophets that have not yet bowed to the forces of oppression, but they don't have a space. They don't have a place for their voices to hear. And I believe it's time for you to help amplify, not just Rev Barber or you, but there are a whole lot of people. A whole lot of voices, faith voices, that if we amplify them, they can begin to grab the heartstrings. Then we have to intentionally diversify the movement with the goal of winning unlikely allies. Fusion politics is building a way to be in relationship with people that you wouldn't normally expect. Then number 8, we got to build transformative long-term coalition that doesn't just measure success by electoral outcomes. We got to understand the connectivity of our issues, and the greatest myth of our time is that extreme policies only hurt a small subset of people, such as people of color or the LGBT community or the poor, when in fact they hold us on. So when you tell the story tomorrow Monday, yeah, it may be inspired by the NAACP, I may happen to be African American, Native American, a little white, and all of that as an architect, but the reality is, in this movement, we have learned we are black, we are white, we are Latino, we're Native American, we're Democrat, we're Republican, we're independent, we're people of faith, people not of faith, but believe in a moral universe. We are natives and immigrants, business leaders and workers, the unemployed, doctors, the uninsured, gay, straight, students, parents, and retirees. We are North Carolina, we are America, and we don't intend to go anywhere anytime soon. Number 9, we must make a serious commitment to academic and empirical analysis of policy. We got to find a way to elevate academicians who understand the movement in the street and can give footnotes. But the worst thing you can do is be loud and wrong. Everything I'm reading up here got a footnote to it somewhere. But we need to almost have a core of scholars that work with DailyKos and that give you that empirical stuff, and then you figure out the way to break it down in a way that the people on the street can hear it. Because moral issues are not impractical. That's why one of the textbooks of our movement is The Cost of Inequality by Joseph Stiglitz. It is the powerful analysis because it actually shows that it's costing us more to keep people poor and bound. Yes, and then number 10, we've got to engage in voter registration and education. Because the power of a fusion coalition is based upon a diversified electorate, and we've got to do it with hope. Do you know that if you just register 10% of the unregistered black people in North Carolina and get them to vote, and then get a good you don't even have to get 50% of white folks, just a good strong core group of them to vote, their future, not their fears, is over for the extreme? Did you know if you register 30% of the unregistered black voters in the South and connect that with progressive whites and Latinos, do you realize the solid South will come a-tumbling down? And there's valor on all of this? Number 12, we got to pursue a strong legal strategy. We got to have some lawyers that see themselves once again as social engineers. That don't say, well, this has never been tried and I don't know if I can win, but they fight because they believe in the fundamental principle of our Constitution. And the lawyers that take what we do in the street into the courthouse. And when that happens, we will find ourselves winning in some different ways. Then we got to utilize social media, coordination in all forms, video, text, Twitter, Facebook. You know, Harriet Tubman didn't have text, Twitter, or Facebook. She got 500 people out of slavery. I wonder what we could do. All she had was moss on the north side of the tree, a North Star, and a 38 pistol in case you got scared and you didn't want to go back and you didn't want to go free, and she will make sure you were not going back to slavery. but the mainstream media don't often tell our story. We had 100,000 people in the street in North Carolina come on a winter day. The mainstream media didn't talk about it. And that's but you do. And then we've got to use the cultural arts like y'all. A movement is only as strong as the songs we sing together. Study the history of the cultural art. Watch how she got up here and in 32 minutes had us all as one family. But this time we got to do the music and the spoken word and the storytelling and the visual arts. And we got to make sure that the images, you know, I tell progressive sometimes, y'all don't know how to have rallies. We have rallies and some prima donna that won't even go to jail gets up to saying, no. Tomorrow Monday, you can't hit the mic unless you're ready to hit the jail. You know what I'm saying? No. It's not just about making sure that the music matches the message. DailyKos, we need some help in elevating voices like y'all, not just the song, but the stories behind the song and beginning to have a way that people can click something. I don't know what the something is, and they can just all day long listen to spoken word. They can just erase and exercise all that other propaganda out of their head until they go somewhere talking about, hold on, keep your eyes on the prize. And then lastly, we must resist the one moment mentality, because we are building a movement, and no one victory will ever usher in the beloved community, which means no single setback can frustrate us. We are building up a new world, and we have to have a movement. And if we do, what can happen, Bob? I'll tell you what I know. Look, we can have a radical revolution of moral values, which is the key to the third Reconstruction. Yes. We can change the consensus. We haven't won all the elections yet in North Carolina, my dog. But you know, when we started, the governor was at 50% of the poll. Now he's at 30 and falling. We started, the legislature was at 40%. Now they're at 19 and falling. When we started, less than 50% of the people were against, were for, protecting voting rights. Now over 50%. Less than 50% of the people were for Medicaid expansion. Now somewhere near 60% are for Medicaid expansion. Less than 50% of the people would accept the tax up hike to pay for public education. Now more than 50% of the people will accept it, because a moral movement and argument changes the game. We've been able to mobilize tens of thousands, 100,000 in the South. We've been able to mobilize in places unexpected. 1,000 people have been arrested, more time than any time in history. We've been able to win in unexpected places, like Asheville, like Mitchell County. There's 99% white, 89% Republican. One of our strongest branches now is in Mitchell County. One of the strongest movements is in Mitchell County. You know what I'm saying? And up here in these mountains, when folk learn how to get together around these moral issues and pull off Mountain Marmon, this is the only place in the country that I know where incumbent Tea Partiers got sick home to drink tea. It was right up here in an off-year election. With a moral movement, you can inspire young people. They'll come in because young people are idealistic and they're looking for some way to be a part of transforming. And when you give them space and they're not just a second thought, when you build a moral movement, you can build long-term where people do not feel depressed and anemic after an election. they see victory different. Let me tell you how moral movement sees victory, and I close. Frederick Douglass, 1857, had to do a speech after the Dred Scott decision. And all the abolitionists, certainly many of them were suffering. They had suffered defeat after defeat. They were feeling bad, Denise. And somebody told Frederick Douglass in that meeting, we lose him. I don't know if he was in the AME church or where he was. But Frederick Douglass said, well, that's one view. But it is, I thank God, only one view. There's another view. There's a brighter view. David, you know, looked small and insignificant when going to meet Goliath. But he looked larger when he had slain him and was standing over him. Thus hath it ever been. Oppression, organized as ours is, will appear invincible up to the very hour of its fall. So, sir, let us look on the other side and see if there are not some things to cheer about, even with this decision. Let's see if there isn't something that will nerve us up anew to keep working toward emancipation. Take this fact, for instance. The anti-slavery movement has, from first to last, suffered no abatement. No matter what they do, we keep fighting. It's gone forth in all directions, and now it's felt in the remotest extremities of the Republic. Started out small and was without capital, either men or money. So, Mom Monday. The odds were all against it. It literally had nothing to lose and everything to gain. There was ignorance to be enlightened, error to be combated, consciousness to be awakened, prejudice to be overcome, apathy to be aroused, the right of speech to be secured, mob violence to be subdued, and a deep radical change to be inwrought in the mind and heart of the whole nation. This great work under God has gone on, and gone on gloriously. Setbacks, yes, but it keeps going. Amid all the changes, all the fluctuations, all the assaults, and the adversaries of every kind, it has remained firm in its purpose, steady in its aim, onward and upward, defying the opposition, and never losing hope. Our strength is in the growth of the anti-slavery conviction, and it's never halted, though we've not seen the ultimate victory yet. There is, says Frederick Douglass, a significant vitality about this abolition movement. It has taken a deeper, broader, and more lasting hold upon the national heart than ordinary reform movements. And it is there that we have our answer. Those of you who still have hope in a progressive world in America, let us now build a movement whose goal is to have a lasting hold on the heart of the South and the heart of the nation. Let us build because our future depends on it. Let us, like Henry David Thoreau, when asked if we'll repent for our activism, say, no, the only thing we'll repent for is asking what demon possessed us to be so quiet in the first place. In the face of such. Let us join with Mother Jones and remind every organization, your organization is not a praying institution. It's a fighting institution. It's an educational institution. Pray for the dead, but fight like hell for the living. Like Dr. King, at the end of the march from Selma to Montgomery, let our cry be, ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. Like Nelson Mandela in the midst of apartheid, remind ourselves every day, it always seems impossible until it's done. And so, Denise and Carmen and Nia, if y'all want to do something, I got an imagination. What if we hooked up together and had a radical revolution of moral values tour and revival all over the South and a few other states in the middle? And what if DailyKos helped us pull this off? And what if James Forbes as a Moses and Rev Barber as a Joshua could get together and hook up with some other folk and pull this off? And what if we find 10 states with the worst records on voting rights and labor and living wages and child poverty and health care and criminal justice reform, and we get those 10 states to agree on a
good.